Welcome to the Golden Gems podcast. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Tupac Shakur, exploring the life of the revolutionary poet who weaponized verse and the enduring impact of his $75 million afterlife.
It's just such a massive topic.
It is.
And I mean, frankly, you look at the calendar and it's kind of wild to think about where we are.
Yeah, the timing of all this.
It's January 2026. We are effectively staring right down the barrel of the 30th anniversary of All Eyez on Me.
30 years. It's unbelievable. It feels like he's been in the news more in the last couple of years than, artists who are actually alive.
For sure.
I've been digging through this mountain of notes. We've got everything from court transcripts out of Nevada to old interviews from '95, some really dense poetic analysis. But the thing that jumps out is that even now, in 2026, we are still legally litigating his life and death.
We absolutely are. I mean, the conclusion of that Duane Keefe D Davis trial in Nevada, that really just dragged everything back into the spotlight.
It put a period at the end of the sentence, legally speaking.
A sentence that had been just hanging there for decades. And beyond just the trial, you had that huge 2025 documentary series that really dug into the final chaotic months of death row records.
Right, and then there's the whole tech angle. I feel like every other week there's a new debate about AI vocals and this idea of digital resurrection.
Oh, he's ground zero for that.
Yeah.
He is the primary case study for the digital afterlife. His voice is being, weaponized, monetized, analyzed 3 decades after he was gone.
It raises some huge ethical questions.
Massive ones. About ownership, about legacy. But I think the real reason we're doing this deep dive today is that if you get distracted by the hologram or the court case, you actually miss the human being at the center of it all.
And that's the mission here, right? The thesis across all of these sources is pretty clear. To understand Tupac, you have to look past the thug life caricature on the t-shirt.
You have to.
You have to see the revolutionary poet, the Shakespearean actor, and really the literary architect who is documenting his own war.
The thug life image was a shield, the poetry. That was the sword. And that story, it doesn't begin with a record deal. It starts way, way before he was even born.
I want to start right there, because looking at his birth certificate was actually surprising. I think most people know the name Tupac Amaru Shakur, but that wasn't his birth name, was it?
No, not at all. He was born Lezane Parish Crooks, June 16, 1971, in East Harlem.
Okay.
But before he was even a year old, his mother changed it. And this is so crucial. It wasn't just like an aesthetic choice. It wasn't something that sounded cool. It was a baptism.
A baptism into what, exactly?
Into a very specific revolutionary lineage. Tupac Amaru was the last Incan emperor.
Right.
He led this massive indigenous resistance against the Spanish conquest back in the 1500s, a revolutionary martyr. So by giving her son that name, Afeni Shakur was effectively drafting him into a history of resistance before he could even walk.
She was telling him who he was meant to be.
Exactly. You are not just a kid from Harlem, you are the continuation of a struggle.
And when you look into who his mother was, Afeni Shakur, I knew she was in the Black Panthers, but I really didn't realize how high up she was.
Oh, she wasn't just a member. She was a section leader for the Harlem chapter.
Yeah.
And the timeline here is it's mind-blowing. She was pregnant with Tupac while she was incarcerated.
Incarcerated.
In the Women's House of Detention in Greenwich Village. She was defending herself, literally acting as her own attorney in the famous Panther 21 trial.
Wait. She was her own lawyer while pregnant with him?
Yes. Facing something like 300 years in prison. And she secured her own acquittal just over a month before Tupac was born.
Wow.
So Tupac himself later talked about that as both the foundational trauma and the miracle of his existence. He was quite literally gestating in a prison cell while his mother was fighting the U.S. government in court.
That is such a heavy inheritance. And it wasn't just her, right? The notes talk about a who's who of the movement in his family.
It's a dynasty of resistance, really. You've got his godfather, Geronimo Pratt, a high-ranking Panther who spent 27 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit.
Right.
You have his godmother, Assata Shakur, who's still on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list, living in exile in Cuba.
So that typical hip-hop poverty narrative, the started from the bottom thing, it just doesn't really fit him.
You have to completely discard it. Tupac wasn't just born into poverty. He was born into this highly intellectual, radicalized environment that was being systematically dismantled by COINTELPRO.
I see that term COINTELPRO come up a lot. For anyone who might only know it as a buzzword, what was it actually doing to a family like his?
It stands for a counterintelligence program. It was a covert and often illegal FBI operation designed to surveil, infiltrate, and disrupt domestic political groups.
And they specifically targeted the Panthers.
They were a primary target. So Tupac grew up watching his family being hunted by the state. He inherited the rhetoric of armed resistance. He didn't learn about revolution from a textbook. He was raised inside a war zone where the enemy was the government.
That intellectual foundation, it really clashes with the gangster image people have, and it feels like that duality really starts to form when they move to Baltimore.
The Baltimore years are absolutely critical. In 1986, the family moves, and he enrolls in the Baltimore School for the Arts.
This is the part that always gets me. He's studying ballet.
Ballet, jazz, poetry, acting. And I don't mean he just dabbled. He was performing in plays by Shakespeare, by Henrik Ibsen. This is where he got that theatrical command of language.
Yeah.
And think about ballet for a second. It's all about posture, presence, control. When you watch Tupac perform later on, he didn't just rap, he projected. He understood dramatic tension, narrative arc, in a way his peers just didn't.
He had that Shakespearean flair.
He saw that the tragedy of the streets wasn't that different from the tragedy in Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. It's all fatalism, betrayal, violence.
But then that bubble bursts, right? In 1988, they moved to Marin City, California. The notes here call it the jungle.
That is the collision point.
Yeah.
You have this young man with a theoretical understanding of oppression from his mother and the artistic training from Baltimore. And suddenly, he just slams into the visceral reality of the crack epidemic in this tiny, impoverished community. And the contrast was just so stark because Marin City is 5 miles from some of the wealthiest zip codes in the country.
It's like he had all the theory, and then he got dropped right into the practical application.
Precisely. And that friction is what creates his early music. He joins Digital Underground, as a roadie and a dancer.
Right.
But by 1991, he puts out Tupacalypse Now.
That album, it wasn't exactly a commercial hit, was it?
No, but it was a political lightning rod. I mean, look at a track like Brenda's Got a Baby. The narrative density in that song. It forced people to confront the grim realities of incest and poverty without ever glorifying them. It was journalism set to a beat.
And it was effective enough that the White House actually got involved. I had forgotten that a vice president weighed in on a rap album that early.
The Dan Quayle incident. A lawyer in Texas claimed his client was influenced by the album to shoot a state trooper. So Vice President Dan Quayle goes on TV and condemns the album, says it has no place in our community.
That seems like such a huge turning point.
It was the moment his art was officially seen as a threat to the social order. He was now a target of the same state machinery that had hunted his family. He inherited the Panther legacy operationally, not just ideologically.
And from that point on, it really feels like the pressure just keeps building until it explodes. We get into this 12-month window between 93 and 94 where the timeline is just chaos.
Escalation is exactly the right word. October 93, he's involved in a shooting with 2 off-duty police officers in Atlanta.
And shooting 2 cops, that usually ends your career. Or your life.
It should have. But the charges were dropped. It turned out the officers were intoxicated, they were carrying stolen weapons, and they'd been harassing someone. Tupac basically acted in self-defense.
That must have felt like a massive validation for him. Like, see, I told you they were the bad guys.
It absolutely reinforced his belief in his own invincibility and his narrative of being persecuted by the police. But then, almost right away, you have the sexual abuse trial in New York in November of 93.
And just before the verdict in that case, the Quad Studios shooting, November 30th, 1994.
This is the event that breaks him. The night before his verdict, he gets ambushed in the lobby of a recording studio in Times Square.
Yeah.
The forensic details are just chilling. He was shot 5 times, twice in the head, twice in the groin, once straight through his hand.
And he checked himself out of the hospital the next day, didn't he?
Less than 24 hours later, he showed up in court in a wheelchair to hear the verdict. But the psychological wounds, they never healed. That event completely rewired his brain.
Right. It solidified his paranoia about the notorious B.I.G. and Puffy Combs who were in the studio that night. He was convinced he'd been set up. And that is what fueled the entire East Coast-West Coast war. To him, it wasn't rap beef, it was an assassination attempt.
So he's convicted, he's been shot, and he gets sent to Clinton Correctional Facility in February 95.
The University of Clinton, as it's sometimes called.
Right. He's sitting in a cell, he's bankrupt, recovering from 5 bullet wounds. Where does a 23-year-old's mind even go?
He goes to the library, he starts reading Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince.
And Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty heavy reading for a prison stint.
You would think.
But it was perfect for his mindset. He starts to view the music industry not as entertainment, but as a literal battlefield that requires military strategy. This is the crucible that forges the Makaveli persona. He decided that if he never got out, he wouldn't be a victim, he would be a general.
And that desperation to get out,
Yeah.
that leads to the visit from Suge Knight.
A Faustian pact. For those who might have skipped lit class, that's making a deal with the devil, right?
Exactly. Selling your soul for power. Suge Knight, the CEO of Death Row Records, shows up and offers to post his $1.4 million bail and fund his appeal.
And in exchange,
Tupac has to sign a 3-album contract with Death Row.
And it was signed on a napkin?
The lore says it was napkin, or at least a very hasty piece of paper. It got him out of prison in October '95, but it bound him to maybe the most dangerous corporate entity in music history. He was now a soldier for Suge Knight.
And the music that comes out of this period, it's just so different. Before the Death Row era really kicks into high gear, we get Me Against the World, which came out while he was still locked up.
And that album, that is his magnum opus of introspection. It's the first time an artist ever had a #1 album while serving a prison sentence.
Wow.
If you listen to a song like So Many Tears, that's a blues record. It's a confession. The rhyme schemes are complex, but the whole tone is just fatalistic. He's accepting his flaws and basically anticipating his own death.
But then he gets out, he signs with Death Row, and we get All Eyez on Me.
And the whole tempo just shifts to industrial warfare. He recorded that entire double album in just 2 weeks.
2 weeks for a double album.
The productivity was just manic. It's this sprawling manifesto of West Coast dominance. The sound change, too, is that polished G-funk.
Let's pause on G-Funk for a second. We hear that term with Dr. Dre and Snoop, but what actually defines that sound?
It's short for gangsta funk. It pulls heavily from 1970s P-funk samples, George Clinton, Parliament. It's got those high-pitched synthesizers, really deep bass lines. It's party music, but with a kind of menacing edge.
Okay.
And producers like Johnny J and Daz Dillinger just perfected it. But on All Eyez on Me, Tupac's lyrics shift from being political to being almost purely hedonistic. Ambitions as a Rita, picture me rollin'. On the surface, it sounds like a celebration.
But looking back now, does it feel like a celebration, or does it feel more like someone running out of time?
It feels like a race. He felt compelled to document every single thought before what he saw as the inevitable end. And that leads to the final phase, the Makaveli era, the Don Illuminati, the 7-day theory.
Recorded in just 7 days.
The vocals, yes. Over just 7 days in August 1996, the sound is so much darker, stripped down. I mean, Hail Mary isn't a radio hit, it's a haunt. It was a psychological purge.
And look who he surrounds himself with. He forms the Outlaws.
Yeah, and the names he gave them. Castro, Napoleon, Mussolini, Idi Amin, Khomeini.
Not exactly subtle.
No. He's naming them after enemies of the state and dictators. This wasn't a rap group. He was building a paramilitary unit, an ideological cell designed to export Panther philosophy through hip-hop. He was drilling them, treating the studio like a barracks.
But amidst all this thug life imagery and the war with Biggie, we can't ignore the other side of him, the actor, the poet.
Which was always running in parallel. I mean, we have The Rose That Grew from Concrete, that book of poetry published after he died. And those aren't rap lyrics. That's American verse, you know, in the tradition of Walt Whitman or Langston Hughes. He was asking to be taken seriously as a literary figure.
And he was just as serious about Hollywood. He said his goal was to be the Black Marlon Brando.
And honestly, I think he had the range for it. Look at Juice in 1992, his performance as Bishop. That method acting was terrifying. Critics compared him to De Niro in Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
He could just turn his eyes dead and become a sociopath. But then he pivots to poetic justice opposite Janet Jackson and shows this genuine romantic tenderness.
And even after he died, we saw films like Gridlocked come out.
Gridlocked is such a hidden gem. He's playing a heroin addict trying to navigate the healthcare system with Tim Roth. It's a dark comedy, and he showed incredible timing and vulnerability. He wasn't playing a caricature. He was playing a broken human being.
It's just heartbreaking to think where that career could have gone.
The what-ifs are staggering. There were talks for him to star in Menace the Second Society, which fell through, but there were also rumors of a potential Quentin Tarantino collaboration. He was being considered for Mace Windu in Star Wars at one point, and he was actively trying to get a biopic of the boxer Jack Johnson made. He was taking acting classes, even while recording All Eyez on Me. He wanted an Oscar.
That level of ambition, it just makes the end even more tragic. He had an exit ramp. He could have just been an actor.
He could have, but he couldn't separate the role from the reality. He felt this duty to the streets that, in the end, just consumed him.
Which brings us to September 7, 1996, Las Vegas.
The MGM Grand, Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon. And the atmosphere was just charged with that death row excess. The catalyst is something so trivial. A lobby brawl with Orlando Anderson, a Southside Compton Crip.
And that was all caught on surveillance video, right?
It was. Tupac attacks Anderson in the lobby, supposedly over a stolen chain. And that moment just highlights the fatal flaw in the whole operation. The complete lack of professional security. He was relying on the death row entourage, essentially gang members on the payroll, instead of professional bodyguards who would have de-escalated that whole situation.
So the fight happens, they leave the MGM, and they head out to a club.
Right. Tupac is in the passenger seat of a black 1996 BMW 750IL. Suge Knight is driving. And they stop at the intersection of East Flamingo Road and Covell Lane.
And that's where the white Cadillac pulls up?
And that's where the physical life ends?
Yeah.
And the $75 million afterlife begins.
So when we look back from here, from 2026, 30 years later, what is the actual legacy? Is it the music? The controversy?
I think we have to see that Tupac was a figure of massive contradictions. But those contradictions were his strength. He was a revolutionary born from the Panthers who signed a corporate pact with the devil.
Right.
He's a sensitive poet who became the face of gangsta rap. An actor who couldn't separate the role from the reality.
He documented his own war.
He did. He weaponized verse. And in doing that, he created this body of work that is still being unpacked, still generating millions, and still challenging us to look at the very systems he critiqued. He forced America to look at the children it had discarded.
It makes me think of that poem you mentioned earlier, The Rose That Grew from Concrete.
And that's the image I really think you should leave with. We focus so much on the tragedy of his death, the forensics, the beefs, but think about the ferocity of his life. If he produced all of this, the albums, the films, the poetry, by the age of 25, what does that say about the potential sitting dormant in communities we systematically ignore?
Yeah.
Tupac wasn't a singular anomaly. He was a rose that managed to grow through a crack in the pavement. The question he leaves us with is, how many other roses are still trapped under the concrete?
That is a powerful question. Thank you for listening to the Golden Gems podcast. We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep celebrating the power of uncompromising voices.